Bom dia a todos, os mais de 600 pessoas e alunos que se inscreveram nesse curso. Good morning and welcome to our foreign guests. Em primeiro lugar, desculpas pelo inglês, pelo fato de ter que ser inglês. I'm sorry that this has to be in English, and I'm really happy of being able to establish this connection. And English was the only language that could allow Brazilian professors to be together with Palestinian lecturers in the same space, in the same virtual classroom. So thank you for the effort you are making to understand, and I hope you can enjoy the most out of this course. This has been a project that has been several months in preparation. And in the first place, I'd like to thank Ambassador Alessandro Candeias, the Brazilian representative to Palestine, for organizing, promoting the academic missions which allowed this encounter to happen and the initiative to therefore come out of it. I went on one of these missions, and Professor João Batista Vargens, who is here with me, also went on another mission. So it's really a great deal due to his enthusiasm and project and vision of having a larger cooperation between Brazilian and Palestinian universities that this course was conceived. We know that collaboration is not easy between Brazil and Palestine universities. There's the language barrier to begin with. There are the problems that the occupation, the Israeli occupation imposes. Israel doesn't give students visas to study at Palestinian universities. It has been making more and more difficult for professors, academics, to spend time at Palestinian universities. So online cooperation is like one of, not the only, but one of the forms of starting this encounter to happen, and bringing to the students in the first place knowledge about Palestine. So we wanted this course to bring to our students the narrative of Palestine, this history of Palestine, taught by Palestinian lecturers themselves. So this is the first point that this course wanted to allow for. I will go on to other mentions that are very important to begin with. So my thank you to Professor João Batista Vargens for his support, partnership, collaboration that has been amazing. My immense thank you to Professor Amir Khalil, who is here. He's a law professor at the Law School of Birzeit, and also the External Academic Relations Officer, who received us so well and was also very great to meet you and to be there. And an immense thank you to Professor Sa'd Nimr for giving this lecture to us today and beginning the subject, talking about the ongoing Nakba. Also, thank you to all the other professors who are taking part of this course throughout the semester. Remembering that there's no payment involved. They're doing this out of their own vocation, collaboration, and spirit of reaching out to you to teach the history of Palestine to us. And I really hope that you manage to, value this by means of learning, exactly what is the purpose of this course. And an immense thank you to the team. So Rafael, my PhD student, Victoria and Clara, our graduate students at the University of São Paulo with us at the Center for Arab Studies, Giovanna, Alexandre, who are graduate students and are working here. There's a huge team. There's a huge amount of preparation in all this, and thank you immensely to each one of you. Finally, I'd like to thank the support of Tabla editor, that has been doing an amazing work translating Arabic books to Portuguese and is supporting this course in a fundamental way with this virtual room. So thank you very much to all of you. Very rapidly, I want to talk about the structure of this course. Out of 12 classes, more than half is dedicated to Palestine, its history and current situation. So it's a course on Palestine by Palestinian lecturers. That's the idea. The other 5 classes, in one way or the other, put side by side and speak about relations established between Brazil and Palestine somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic. And so we have courses about translation, South-South translations, Palestinian immigration to Brazil, and also we put side by side major social movements, major social social questions that have already a long, decades-long history of collaboration, by the way, and we want with this not to draw any comparison because each history is singular, and we want to actually to highlight the diversity of these movements, of these social movements. But what we do want to understand is why Palestine resonates so deeply in Brazilian social movements. This is a reality that we have seen for quite some time. Just to give a few examples, we can there's a sentence here in Brazil that says, translating, it says, favela, the favela, the slums, the favela, our Gaza Strip. Many times we hear this sentence. There's an occupation built by the the homeless movement, the urban homeless movement, an occupation, and they called this neighborhood that they created Palestine. It's in São Paulo. There's a whole building in the center of São Paulo, which is called occupation. It was empty and it was occupied by immigrants and people homeless and movement, and it was called Occupation Leila Khaled. The Mapuche resistance in Chile, it's called the Palestinians of Latin America by many people. And Bogota, there's a neighborhood called Palestine in Bogota. So, we want to understand, not by comparing easily, immediately, but putting side by side, listening to the stories of these movements, to their narratives, understand why this happens. When we talk about identification, just to finish this opening of the course, when we talk about identification, we do not erase singularities, particularities, differences. When we talk about identification, we mean the identification that spurs, that comes out of struggle, of resistance, of the defense of liberation, social justice, and equality, therefore. So it also requires a flow. It requires, it cannot be one-sided at the risk of collapsing into itself. It requires permission, it requires action, it requires encounter. So this is what we hope to think about a bit throughout this course, together with understanding of Palestine through the lectures of Palestinian colleagues. So thank you very much to all of you. And I'd like to pass the word to Ambassador Alessandro Candeias.
Thank you very much, my dear Professor Arline Clemencia. I'd like to greet Professor Amil Halil, Professor Sa'd Nimr, Professor João Batista Vargens, and welcome all the participants of the seminar on Brazil and Palestine. I wish to congratulate the organizers of the seminar, especially you, Professor Arline Clemencia. This is a joint endeavor of the Universities of São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Brasília, Birzeit, and Al-Quds, with total support of our Brazilian mission here in Ramallah. I believe this is the first major academic event connecting universities from Brazil and Palestine. So this is a great honor for me as the ambassador of Brazil to Palestine to participate and support this seminar. I believe we start today a systematic networking of our universities. I call this people-to-people diplomacy, because diplomats and governments come and go, the universities stay, you are key actors. So I wish that our universities become central actors of the new chapter of the relations between Brazil and Palestine. Brazil wishes to strengthen and amplify its ties with Palestine. And I believe that universities can play a key role, a leading role in building these bridges between our societies. I have to say that I liked a lot the title that you've chosen for the seminar, Sources of Identification, because identification refers both to identity and to idem, its etymological root, the same, idem. As you know, Brazil has a very strong national identity, and we are interested in understanding, in knowing more, the intellectual work and debate about the Palestinian national identity. For example, here in Ramallah, I always hear and see more emphasis on statehood and on state building rather than on nationhood. And I believe that the debate on nationhood, on Palestinian nationhood, is key to its future. As for the idem concept, the likeliness, Palestine is very similar to some regions of Brazil. I am, for example, from the Northeast. I'm from Recife. Eu sou nordestino. And I recognize great similarities with Palestine in my own homeland. I see little parts of Palestine in the Nordeste of Brazil. And also I see little Brazils in parts of Palestine, in the faces of the people, in the landscape, the ecology, especially the Arab heritage in our culture and family values. As you know, the Portuguese brought to Brazil between the 16th and the 18th centuries strong Arab inputs that are deeply rooted in the Brazilian society, coming from the south of Portugal, south of Spain, and north of Africa. So I'm glad that our seminar will present these similarities in the next months, especially as Professor Arlene pointed out, the social challenges. For example, when I visited here, the Silouan community, I live here in Jerusalem. So when I went to Silouan or when I go to refugee camps, I see grassroots communities in Brazil. They are much alike, so they have a lot to share and to discover mutually. If you allow me, I'll just very briefly, as a final remark, point out some areas of the new agenda that Brazil is working and developing with Palestine. I'd like to mention other areas like business and trade missions, cooperation in sports, tourism, cultural events, technical cooperation for development, and also the teaching of Portuguese for the Brazilian community living here in Palestine. Probably very few people know that we have around 6,000 Brazilian Palestinians living here. Besides, of course, the big 10 times more, I think almost 60,000 Palestinian diaspora living in Brazil. So we do have this strong social connection already to build on. Finally, our wish is that we can move on after this seminar to establishing an Institute of Advanced Studies, Brazil-Palestine, with the help of the universities. I would love to see this. So, Ahla wa Sahla, wish you all a very successful seminar. Thank you.
If you could unmute yourself, Arlene.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Ambassador. And please, Dr. Amir Khalil.
Thank you very much, and good morning according to your time, and good evening according to our time to all of you, and many thanks for you, dear Arlene, for organizing this program, and for you colleagues who did the effort. And this is very important really sessions. Today we are joining with His Excellency the Ambassador Alessandro, the representative of Brazil to Palestine, who really helped to develop this collaboration between Palestinian universities and the Brazilian universities. It's very important. It's my honor as well to be with you for this session, indeed, for the opening. And I'm happy to see my colleague, Dr. Sa'd Nimr. He will be deliver, the first lecture in this program, and he's representing Birzeit University in this very good program. It's very important to shed the light on Palestine, on Palestinian higher education, on a Palestine source of identification via various lectures that will be delivered from professors from Brazil and Palestine on various topics such as refugees, diaspora, political parties, apartheid, and the perspective for the future, for the young generation, for the Palestinians themselves. It's very important nowadays. We are not isolating ourselves. We are living in the same global. We are sharing the same concerns. And I believe some of you, they could really support. Some of you, they could really feel what we are speaking about while delivering these courses in collaboration between different prestigious universities. Indeed, the course will reflect on the possible sources of this feeling of closeness and identification. They will tackle different topics from texts, from academics, novels, stories, and the daily life of the Palestinian themselves, the student at university, and the people in Palestine, or other social issues that find expressions of similarity and other matters that we share a human in this global. This is a really strong and good program. I'm very delighted to be with you. I'm representing Birzeit University and I'm teaching at the Faculty of Law. Beside that, I'm doing the administrative job at the external academic relation. My job is to broaden, the collaboration between Birzeit University, and we try to help other Palestinian universities to have collaboration with other universities worldwide. Recently, we are happy to have two good collaboration, and this is the initiative started by His Excellency Ambassador Alessandro, to invite Dr. Arlene to be in Birzeit University to join, our community and other colleagues from São Paulo universities. And we have recently signed this agreement and other agreement we are establishing with Rio de Janeiro. So the collaboration is there. The start indeed is there. And I wish the participant all the success in this seminar. And I hope, and this is personal invitation for all of you to come and to Palestine, to Birzeit University, where you will really find different programs are waiting for you. We do have different kind of programs for international students to come, for Brazilian students to come, or administrative at different university and academics to join our very good academic, courses at the university or other, program at the university. Finally, I would like to see you all in Palestine. As you will see, we are having many challenges in Palestine. We are at the universities. It's not an easy to run university in Palestine because the occupation and the Israeli, they putting different constraints against the academic freedom, against, the movement of our students, the movement of our professors. Maybe to consider to come to Palestine is not easy for international, because the Israeli, they have a new regulation, which we are against such regulation. We reject the new Israeli measures against academic freedom, because in academia, we always teach our students academic freedom. We believe in that. And I believe all of us, we share the same concept of academic freedoms. However, the Israel, they put, some regulation, which is constrain the fundamental rights of Palestinians to educate and to determine the right of education. So we are against such a regulation, and we believe later on you can support such regulation. And I hope, despite all the fact that we are still there, we are living in Palestine, we have good universities, and our people, they are looking to live their life as a normal. And this is an invitation for all of you to come and to be part of our Palestinian community and to be one of us. Thank you all for this participation, and I wish you all the best. Many thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Amir Khalil. That's a wonderful invitation, by the way. And Professor João Vargens, please. It seems like João Batista Vargens' image is frozen. I wonder if he has a connection problem. Professor João Batista, please, we'd love to hear your words now.
Saidati wa sadati, minhas senhoras e meus senhores, inna alohati inglesiyati, hiya alohati hazihil nadwa. ولكن أريد أن أتكلم كلمتين بلغتين، باللغة العربية هي لغة رسمية في فلسطين، وباللغة البرتغالية هي اللغة الرسمية في البرازيل. Senhoras e senhores, bem sei que a língua inglesa é a língua de exterminário. Porém, eu quero falar duas palavras em duas línguas. A árabe, a língua oficial da Palestina, e a portuguesa, a língua oficial do Brasil. أولاً أشكر السيد سفير البرازيل أليساندرو كراندياس على Palestine, fichar a senhor embaixador do Brasil, Alessandro Candeia, por minha visita. Acho que a Satiza também aos acadêmicos, professores e alunos, que ora na Ayane Film Mustakbal Caribe. Começamos hoje nosso diálogo. Espero que aconteça presencialmente, olho no olho, em futuro próximo. Aluf Mabruk, Liustaza Arlene Clemesha, Munaska Anadwa, professora Arlene Clemesha, coordenadora do seminário, Nadwa Jamia, Wa Almutaka Alucarib. Feliz seminário a todos, no próximo encontro, inshallah. Oxalá.
Thank you very much. Muito obrigada, Professor João Vargas. I'm afraid João Vargas is in the middle of a beautiful place just outside the city of Rio de Janeiro. His connection is not so good, but it's his privilege to be in the countryside. So I would like to thank everyone for this presentation. And I would like to call now Rafael Oliveira, who will mediate Professor Sa'd Nimr's class. But while he enters, please, I'd like to give the floor to Professor Sa'd Nimr for his lecture. And I would like to say finally that he's going to speak about the Nakba, which is ongoing. And recently, it has been probably even more difficult to speak about the ongoing Nakba with what is happening now in Palestine beneath our eyes, just as we speak. So thank you very much for all this effort and for this class to Professor Sa'd.
Okay, thank you, Arlene, and thank everyone for having this opportunity really to talk about Palestine. However, I don't want to take that much of time to start immediately. And since we are used under the occupation for punishment, it is a punishment to ask a Palestinian to speak on his favorite subject for 50 minutes only. It's part of the punishment. However, I thought that if we want to talk about a Nakba, the Palestinian Nakba and the ongoing Nakba, definitely we have to look first at some of the history aspect of the Palestinian question and how the whole thing started. So I'll start from a little bit early in the history of the Palestinian question in general to reach to what's going on today. As it's important to understand the basics and the essential issues which was at the very beginning of the Palestinian question, because before 1917 and under the Ottoman era, we were just Palestinian people like all other people living in the region, normally peasants and farmers and doing their own business till we've been, colonized, and then now we are subjected to ethnically cleansing of Palestine and to get all the Palestinian indigenous people to get out of the country. However, let's start with the concept of the Zionist movement. The Zionist movement, there is always a mix-up in the mind of the people that Zionism has something to do with Judaism, which is a religion, but Zionism, it's a political movement. And we have to understand that, and not necessarily that all Jews around the world are Zionists. At the same time, we know that we have other people who are non-Jews, they are Zionists. So we'll start with the concept of Zionism and what the Zionism wanted as part of the colonial power in Europe by the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century. So shall we have the first slides, please? And yep. Next, please. Yeah, next. Okay, Theodor Herzl. Theodor Herzl is the founder of the Zionist movement, modern Zionist movement, if you like, and he's an Austrian journalist who was an atheist, and he used to ask the Jews to participate in the European society, especially during the period of anti-Semitism growing in Europe. And he was even asking them to convert their religion if they were under harassment. So he didn't care that much about the religion at that time. However, next slide, please. However, what happened that he changed his mind, and he started to advocate the idea for Jews to leave Europe and to live somewhere else and to create a state only for the Jews. Next slide. Right. So Herzl later on, he changed his mind about, ideas about Jewish emancipation and assimilation in the society, the European societies, and to remove themselves from Europe to create their own state. Next. Consequently, it's that brought the issue of Jewish question into under the eyes and in light. The solving the Jewish problem and the anti-Semitism, which was growing in Europe at that time, that we have solutions such as that the people of Europe must unite in order to end state racism against Jews and to struggle together. Jews and Europeans, other Europeans, for democratic laws that respect equality and stand against discrimination in color, race, and belief. So that is the normal issue here, to end the racism and to end the discrimination against Jews in Europe who were suffering from this anti-Semitic that was growing, and especially in East Europe. But was there other options or other options that might be, a solution? Let's see. Next slide. Herzl suggested this solution: to get all Jews out of Europe and forming a state only for them, a Jewish state, i.e. that is as if when we have the discrimination and the racism in America, United States, during the 40s and 50s and 60s, is that right to say that to solve the problem of racism, to get all the blacks from America and create a state for them? Is that the solution if we have any problem, or should we fight really to change the laws and to end racism and to respect all humans regardless of their color, ethnic group, or even religion? Next slide. However, in the ideas of Herzl himself, he thought that he should create a Jewish state, and hence he wrote his book, the famous book. It's called the Judenstaat in German language, which means the Jewish state, and he promoted the idea that we should create a special state only for the Jews. However, his problem was at that time that most of the Jews in Europe, they didn't even like the idea. And why should we leave the country? Why should we leave where we've been living and born and having our businesses just because of some harassment and discrimination? We should work differently. However, he went on with his idea of the Jewish state and to create a Jewish state, in spite of the fact that lots of Jews were against this idea of removing themselves from Europe to create a new state. Next slide. Right, so we have a few ideas here that solving the Jewish problem. First of all, we have to understand that anti-Semitism is a European problem created and practiced in Europe. We have nothing to do with it. At the same time that Herzl was talking about anti-Semitism in Europe, We have lots of Jews who are living in Morocco, in Egypt, in Syria, in Palestine, in Yemen, in different countries around the Arab world, and they were living normally like the rest of the people, regardless of the religion, because we have Christian, we have Muslims, and we have Jews living together, even in Palestine, the same. And we were all neighbors, and we are all Palestinian Arabs, and with different religions, like what's going on today in Ramallah, for instance, or in Palestine, okay, that you can't differentiate between one shop and the other, whether which one is for a Christian and which one is for a Muslim, because we are all the same, we are the same people, we are the same language, we everything, just, you know, different religions, and that should not make any problem. There is a huge tolerance in Palestine regarding the religions. So Jews, they used to live in the Middle East in general and all Arab countries normally like all other people around, and there was no discrimination whatsoever against them. However, this idea is only in Europe, because by the end of the day, as Arabs in general, we are also a Semitic people, so we can't, you know, be accused of anti-Semitism because we are Semitic also. The second fact, that to solve the problem of anti-Semitism in Europe is by fighting to change the laws in Europe and to stand against all kinds of racism. That's for sure. And the third fact, which is equally important, the Zionists as a political movement demanding of a Jewish state is a racist statement by definition. When you say you want a state only for Jews, it is a racist statement by itself. So from the very beginning, we can say that the perspective, the ideas of the Zionist movement was based on not only colonialism, but also racism by itself. Next slide, please. Right, that's what was written by Herzl himself in his diaries. He's saying that it is essential that the suffering of Jews become worse, and this will assist in realization of our plan. I have an excellent idea. I shall induce anti-Semitic to liquidate Jewish wealth. The anti-Semitic will assist us thereby, in that they will strengthen the persecution and oppression of Jews. The anti-Semitism shall be our best friend. Can you imagine that? Because he wanted to execute his idea, and because the Jews were refusing his idea, he wanted more Semitism to be in Europe and to become worse even. Semitism will help him in, you know, bringing Jews or getting Jews out of Europe to bring them somewhere else to create a state. However, next slide, please. In 1897, the Zionist movement was established officially, and they have their first Congress in Basel, in Switzerland. That was 1897. And they argued in that conference, they are all convinced that they should have a Jewish state. Where should it should be? Argentina, Uganda. Argentina, because there was already an immigration from Europe to Argentina, and there was a Jewish community, so they wanted to follow their fellow Jews who went to Argentina. So the idea was not about where to go. Uganda, it was offered for them by the British, since the British were at that time colonizing Uganda, and they told them it's a vast country, it's full of resources, and you can create a state there. Plus that the original people who are living in Uganda are the barbarian and, you know, savages, so you won't have any problem with that. And then someone came out with the idea of Palestine. It was not on religious basis at all, or any kind of even historical basis, but they tried to play that issue, Palestine, historically and religiously, in order to convince the Jews to come to this state, to create a state in Palestine, under the pretension that historically we've been here, and historically we I don't know what, and then you can come. Some 3,000 years ago we've been there, so we are returning back to Palestine, and all this kind of rubbish to convince the Jewish community in Europe at that time to agree to the idea of removing themselves from Europe to go to create a new state for them only. Right, next please. And the Zionist movement was seen at that time in Europe as part of the colonial movement in Europe. And on this, I would recommend Edward Said's book on the Palestinian question, who put a chapter about the relationship between the Europeans and the Zionist movement at that time, and how that the Zionist movement was seen as part of the white colonial movement at that time, and they were like, you know, in the same line with the European colonialism. Including the British who were at that time the supreme, if you like, power in the whole area, and they liked the idea of supporting Zionism and to give them something. And hence 1917 Balfour Declaration came out by the Foreign Minister Arthur Balfour, representing the government, the British government at that time, and he gave this declaration. After many drafts anyway, they came with this one. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the declaration. I have much pleasure to convey to you, on behalf of His Majesty government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspiring, which has been submitted to and approved by the cabinet. The text saying, His Majesty government view in favor or favor the establishment in Palestine of a nation home for Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. It is being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of the existing non-Jewish community in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. For God's sake, you can't find more racist than this kind of a statement. When he described the indigenous people, the Palestinian people who are living in Palestine, and he called us the non-Jewish community. They didn't address us in any other name, to say the original people, to say the people who are living in Palestine, the owners of the land, or whatever. No, we were recognized as the non-Jewish communities in Palestine, and that we have only civil and religious rights, not political rights, only civil and religious rights, while Jews could enjoy the political status in any other country that they have already. So you can see that this kind of statement, or declaration, it's totally colonialist, and it represents the colonialism and the favoring the Jewish in this case to establish a national home in Palestine for them. They didn't say state, because already they have promised the Arabs with a state, an Arab state. So they try to make it on stages, bit by bit. However, that was the declaration. What's really noticeable about that this declaration came in November, 2nd of November, 1917, when Britain was not even occupying Palestine. So Palestine was still at that moment under the Ottoman Empire. So the British have no power over Palestine to give it to somebody else, or to create a national home for somebody else who's coming also from Europe. So it's like on both sides, it's absolutely a kind of a declaration that was very colonialist declaration. Next slide, please. Right. At that time, in 1918, the British colonial power came from Egypt, and they occupied Palestine. The population in Palestine at that time was on that situation. Muslims were the majority, 81%, Christians were 11%, and Jews were 8%. But we were one society at that time, and we have no problem. And we have received some even immigration from Europe for Jews, and we welcomed them, and they lived among us also normally, exactly as we received later on the Armenians who ran away from the massacres, and they live in Palestine till today normally like all other Palestinians. So we have no problem with anyone to come and live with us, as far as they are not going to kick us out or to take our land in the way that the Zionist movement was thinking as a colonial project. Next, please. Right. So since 1918, after the occupation, the British occupation, the British occupation colonial power, they facilitate everything for the Jews and for the Zionist movement to come and to create their own reality. So they started by 1918 to change the demography of Palestine. That was one of the aims or the objectives of the Zionist movement, to change the demography of Palestine by encouraging Jewish immigration on mass numbers. The second was to obtain as much land as they could, to either by buying or by allocating this land from the British, who was the colonial power, and to build an economy based on industrialization, which at that time, the Middle East, all of it was an agrarian society, and we have the beginning of industrialization. So if this kind of state started or built its economy on industrialization, it will be advanced economically in the whole region. And the last one was to build the infrastructure for a state. Though the declaration was talking about a national home for Jews in Palestine, not a state, but it was well known to the British and to the Jewish immigrants and the Zionist movement that eventually they are going to establish a state. So they started as early as that time to prepare the infrastructure for the state, such as the universities, hospitals, and even the parliament, and lots of other things that they wanted to prepare beforehand to establish their project in Palestine. Next, please. Right, now the borders which the British had drawn between the countries, as you can see, there was nothing called Jordan. There is a river called Jordan. So they created Jordan, and you can see clearly that it is created because of the straight lines of the map. Someone just sat down there and started with a pencil creating country. The idea of creating Transjordan at that time was, if Jews are going to establish a Jewish state in Palestine, what shall we do with the Palestinians who are living there? Hence, creating Jordan, so they can push the Palestinians out to Jordan, and in such case, they can establish a Jewish state in Palestine. Next, please. However, that didn't go, without the Palestinians, without fighting back. There were so many uprisings and revolutions against the British and against the Zionist movement, starting with 1921 uprising and 1929 uprising, and then in the 33 demonstrations and uprisings. So the Palestinians were trying to fight back this project and the colonial power. In 1936, there was a big revolution called Al-Qassam Revolution, or the Palestinian Revolt of 1936-39, and it lasted for 3 years, and it was against the British directly to liberate Palestine from the British colonial power, and consequently there will be no Zionist project if the British left the country. However, it ended in 1939 when the Second World War happened, and the Second World War, the British didn't want at all any kind of interruptions in the backyard wherever they are in the region. So they brought a lot of their soldiers. It's said that it's 1/5 of the soldiers came to, or the forces, British forces came to Palestine to suppress this revolution, which they managed to do it by the beginning of the Second World War. Next, please. During the revolution in 1937, because of the situation, the British asked a commission to come from Britain to study the situation. And Beale Commission came to Palestine in order to try to solve the problem or to figure out what's going on. Now, Beale Commission recommended the partition of Palestine, and that was the very first idea about partitioning Palestine into two states, one for the Jews and one for the Palestinian Arabs. The yellow part supposed to be the Jewish state with only 28% of the area, and the green part is supposed to be the Palestinian state with 64% of the area, and the red strip you can see is the Jerusalem, and it should be international zone for everyone. That plan was refused by the Palestinians as well as by the Zionist movement. From the Palestinian perspective, it was, why should we share our country and give part of our country to someone who's coming from Europe because he had problems? Why should we give up part of our country to someone who even does not deserve to come in here? Why? That's why the Palestinians refused, and the Zionist movement refused because that was not the plan. The plan is to have Palestine as a state, not part of Palestine, 28% only of Palestine to be designed for us. So both sides rejected the project. However, by the end of the Second World War, can we have the next slide, please? By the end of the Second World War, the population in Palestine was exactly like the last of the chart, where in 1948, 33% of the population were Jews and 66% were Palestinian Arabs. The numbers is 700,000 Jews and 1.4 million Palestinian. That was at least the demography of Palestine when Israel started in 1948. Please, next step. Right. What happened now in 1947-48, and here it's important because of the narratives and who's talking about what, especially when we name the period Nakba for the Palestinians, which is the catastrophe for the Palestinians when they lost everything. Let's have the next slide and we'll explain that. The World War II, after the finish of it, it was shocking facts about the Holocaust created realities in the region. We know that the Holocaust is something really very bad in the face of the human race in general, and we should all do our best not to have it repeated anywhere around the world. But the reality of having the Holocaust in Europe created these two realities. The first one is a huge sympathy and feeling of guilt towards the Jews by the European countries. Most of the European countries felt the guilt because they couldn't help or they didn't help the Jews during this Holocaust and these massacres. The second reality was that terrorist organizations or Zionist terrorist organizations waged a war on the British troops in Palestine, demanding the declaration of Jewish state. There was so many of these small organizations, they started to come out and they started a campaign of terrorist actions against the British and against the Palestinians. Even the British, they considered many of the leaders of these organization as terrorists, and they are wanted to the British troops. However, they were demanding the declaration of a Jewish state, or if you like, as they put it, these organizations, they were demanding independence. Independence for what and for whom? And the independence from whom? It's really, really confusing, but they were convinced that they wanted independence to create a Jewish state immediately on our land. Next, please. And because of all these terrorist actions in Palestine, the United Nations convened, and in the United Nations General Assembly, they took a decision or a declaration, or if you like, a resolution to partition Palestine. The partition now became reality by a resolution by the United Nations General Assembly, which in the picture, as you can see, the green part will be the Jewish state and the pink part will be a Palestinian state. The Jewish, in this case, will get 56% of the total area of Palestine, while the Palestinian will get 42%, in spite of the fact, as I mentioned, that Palestinians were 66% and Jews were only 33%. In spite of that, they gave them more than the Palestinians. And they kept Jerusalem as 2%, Jerusalem and its surrounding area as an international zone. That decision came in November, 29th of November 1917, which today, this date, considered the solidarity date with the Palestinian people. So on the 29th of November 1947 came this resolution. The British, after the resolution, they asked for 6 months period of time to withdraw and to end their mandate on Palestine and to get out of the country. So they asked for 6 months. So what happened in these 6 months? Please, next slide. According to this partition plan, if we look at the population, we will find that even in the part that Israel is going to create their own state on it, which is the green area, that 52% of the population in that area will be Palestinians and only 48% will be Jews. So if they are going to create a Jewish state, a pure Jewish state for only Jews, could they do it with 52% of the population of that state will be Palestinian Arabs? Definitely not. So they have to cleanse those people out in order to create a pure Jewish state. And that's what happened in 1947, started. Next, please. So in November 47, the war started. This is the facts about what happened at that time, not the narratives that we are now all know and talking about Nakba that happened in 1948, but no, we are talking about these very crucial 6 months between the resolution in 1947 and between May, after the British troops left and the creation of the State of Israel. 6 months, nobody is talking about them, or nobody wanted to talk about them because it has a different flavor. Okay, next, please. So what happened that Jews immediately after, or the Zionist movement immediately after the resolution, they started to claim the areas which are supposed to be their own country, a Jewish state. And since it is populated already with Palestinians, so they started, to push the Palestinian out and to start a war against the Palestinian. And we were alone in this war, if you like, when they started to cleanse the Palestinian out. I'll give you an example. Before the establishment of the State of Israel, Haifa, as one big city on the coastal plain, fall down because the Zionist troops, they surrounded Haifa and start bombarding Haifa and forcing people to go to the sea with small boats, and lots of them just drown. And not only that, but also they poisoned the reservoir of Haifa because they were controlling the mountains above Haifa. Next, please. So what the Zionists did during that period, conventional war against like the war on Haifa and other areas, they committed massacres and they did a psychological war against the Palestinians, and then occupy and destroy was the end and the final part. So we'll look at some of those methods. Please, next. Yeah. conventional war. It's just, keep next because it's only pictures. So it's a conventional war, and the Jewish troops at that time, the Zionist troops, they have airplanes, artillery, tanks, while the Palestinians have nothing at all, because we were under the British occupation, who were just, after the revolution, 36, 39, they just, deprived the Palestinian of any mean of resistance. Next, please. And next, just to show the pictures of the conventional war. Next, and next. Now, the massacres, we have at least registered 22 massacres during that period, between November 47 till May 48, before the establishment of Israel. The most important of these massacres were, next please, right, this Tantura, Deir Yassin, and Dawaimi. And if you look at the map, I'm sorry that the map also in Arabic, the one in the north, and you can see near Haifa, the red dot, this is Tantura. The second one, Deir Yassin, it's near Jerusalem, in the middle of Palestine. And the third one, it was in the south, on the verge of the desert in Palestine. It's called Dawaimi. Let's go to the pictures. Next, please. This is Tantura, the village, the Palestinian village on the sea. Next, please. And okay, and, it's a beautiful small village which was totally destroyed, and there was a massacre, a big massacre there, where forced the people to dig trenches, and then they shoot them and make that trench as a grave for them. Apart from the rape, apart from lots of atrocities which was in that massacre. Next, please. This is the massacre of Deir Yassin. Deir Yassin became very, very famous massacre. It happened in the 9th of April, 1948, because it's near to Jerusalem. All the diplomatic envoys there, all the companies or the media, if you like, it's in Jerusalem. So it was covered very well. And they meant with this massacre to be really, really very brutal, where the killing was too much, and the way they killed the people there, the Palestinians, was in a very, very bad way, like, killing the children in front of their parents, and killing the parents sometimes in front of the children. Even pregnant women, they got out the fetus from their bellies while they are still alive. And, it was really, really very horrible. And the idea was, this is the second one, the psychological war. Now, they told the few that they escaped and they, left in that massacre, go and tell the story about what happened in Deir Yassin. So the story spread all over the villages in Palestine. So later on, the Israeli troops or the Zionist troops would come to the village and say, would you leave on your own, or you will be facing the same fate like Deir Yassin? So they were using it in a psychological war. Next, please. This is also in Deir Yassin. Next. This is Dawaimi. Next. Dawaimi, it's in the south of Palestine, and lots of people take refuge into that village, coming from everywhere when they ran away from the war, and they came to this village. So they killed around 1,000 in one day, and it was, a lot of killing. The Red Cross went there after they heard that there is a massacre. And the Israelis said, don't go to the village, because it's a war zone, and we can't, ensure your security. So come in 2-3 days. And they reported, the Red Cross, they reported that when they came after 3 days, they couldn't find the village at all. The whole village was demolished and, being with the land. But they said that we smell the death in that area, but there is no village anymore. However, in May 15th, the last of the British soldiers leave Palestine. Then it was the announcement of the birth of Israel. And then the Arab League decided war against Israel. See, now we talked about 6 months with 22 massacres, with lots of expelling of the Palestinians from their homeland and ethnically cleanse whole areas. Now they declared a state. Now, from now on, the Israeli narratives would start, right? Because the Israeli would say, usually, after we establish our state, we're a small state, and, we are getting out of the Holocaust, so we have a small state. And 7 Arab countries attacked us. 7 Arab countries attacked us. We were about to be annihilated, and they wanted to kill us. This is a second catastrophe, but this is not true. Okay, next slide, please. So on the left with the blue, these are the Zionist troops, the Haganah, which was the biggest one, and it's the official army, if you like, which later on became the Israeli army of today. Balmach, Argon, Steren, Lehi, Etzel, all those are these small terrorist organizations which were fighting against the Palestinians, and before that, even with the British. From the Arab side, Egypt participated, Jordan, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, and other countries. The first 3 are the most important, Egypt, Jordan, Iraq. They have the armies. The Syrian there was not an army yet. So they sent like volunteers, and they created an army called Salvation Army with volunteers from the Syrian and the Palestinians. Lebanon participated in that war. They sent us 400 soldiers. 400 soldiers. Morocco participated in that war, supposedly, and they sent us 70 soldiers without weapon, and they told them that the weapon will follow. And Saudi and others also, they participated in it. But in the imagination and in the narrative, in the heads of even the Palestinians and the Arabs and around the world, Israel is a very small country created after the Holocaust. And now we are talking about 7 Arab countries. So the impression that the Arab troops were, in big masses. The next, please, next slide. But this is the reality. Next slide, please. Right. Underarmed Jewish troops were 93,000, and all Arab troops with all countries is 23,000. So it's like, 4 times the Jewish troops were against the Arabs. Yet even Egypt, they couldn't continue because of lots of problems. Jordan and Iraq were the 2 other countries they participated, but there was an agreement, especially that Jordan was the one who's leading all the Arab troops. However, it finished on that 1948, finished, and the Arab lost. The result of that war was, next please, well, first of all, that during the war, the Zionist movement created 3 myths. The war started in 1948 after the Arabs declare war against Israel. They do not talk about the 6 months earlier than the beginning of the war in 1948. Between 47, end of 47 till the mid of 48, these 6 months, they don't talk about them at all. And they immediately start talking about after 1948, after the establishment of the state. The second thing, that Jews are victims and Arabs going to eliminate them. And we saw that there was no even opportunity for the Arabs against the Jewish troops who had the equipment and who had the support and everything. So it was another myth or lie. And the last one, that Palestinians left Palestine on their own will, and Arabs asked them to leave. That the Palestinians who get out of their country, as if not, that was not an ethnic cleansing of Palestine, and people were put in trucks, the people were put into boats, and they were pushed out, and others were, pushed towards the borders, even in buses or to let them really leave to other countries, otherwise they will be killed. They pushed us out and creating the problem of the Palestinian refugees. Next, please. Next. Yeah, if we look back at the map, the green and the yellow area is supposed to be the Palestinian part, and the orange area is supposed to be the Jewish state. But what the Jewish state did, not only that they took the 56% according to the resolution, but they exceeded and they took the green areas, which is supposed to be part of the Arab state. And they kept us with only the yellow parts, which is the West Bank today and Gaza Strip. And all the other green areas, which is supposed to be part of the Arab world, was also occupied during that war. So they were not about to be eliminated, as they said in their myth. To the contrary, they were winning this war. Yeah, next, please. The result was, this is the expulsion of the Palestinians. Next, please. And you can see, if you are running out, away from a war, I don't think that you'll, go in a fashion way to go in a single order, single row. The fact of this picture that the Israeli troops were shooting at the right and on the left of the people who are marching, so they will go only in one direction, which is the direction of north of Palestine to go to Syria or to Lebanon. Next, please. The end of what happened in that war, that lots of Palestinians, we are talking about almost 900,000 out of 1.4 million Palestinians became refugees. They got out of their cities, villages, and areas. In 1948, the UNRWA, United Nations, was created, and they made refugee camps for the Palestinians. Today, we have a total of 58 refugee camps, 10 in Jordan, 9 in Syria, 12 in Lebanon. In the West Bank, we have 19, and in Gaza Strip, 9 refugee camps, where these Palestinian refugees lived. Now, officially by the UNRWA registered 750,000 Palestinian refugees. This is the UNRWA official number, those who had ID today indicating that they are refugees from 1948. And there is a big number, which is around 100,000 Palestinian refugees who were not registered, especially the rich Palestinians who could go on their own, or those who have relatives in the next cities, so they didn't register themselves as refugees. So we ended up with more than 100,000 Palestinians who were refugees but not registered officially by the United Nations. Next, please. And this diagram will show us the how the distribution of these refugee camps and numbers. But what concerns us is the last line, where the refugees registered by the United Nations, as in 2022, last year, it was almost 6 million Palestinians. 6 million Palestinians. While the Palestinian record with the 100,000 that they are not registered showed around 8 million refugees. So our numbers are 8 million refugees, but the recognized one by the United Nations are 6 million almost. Next, please. Next. These are pictures from the refugee camps. Okay, so now Palestine became 3 parts. Gaza on its own, West Bank, which was annexed to Jordan after the 1948, and Israel. And our people became, scattered all over these areas, additionally to the asylum countries such as Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. And a lot of them also went to to Iraq and to Egypt, and others to European countries, to America. They immigrated all over the places. So we are not talking here about losing a battle or losing a war. We lost a homeland. We lost the total homeland in 1948. And after that, we became under Jordan as far as the West Bank is concerned, and Gaza became under the Egyptian military order. Well, the Palestinians start to fight back in order to bring themselves back to Palestine, but that was never, happened because of lots of factors. However, in 1967, Israel waged a war against the Arabs, against Syria, Jordan, and Egypt at the same time, in the same day, which known as the 1967 war or the 6 Days War. They call it 6 Days War. I call it the 43 Minutes War, because they destroyed all the air force for the Arab countries while they are still grounded, and they demolished also the runways for the airplanes, and it means that the Israeli army got the supremacy over the skies, and Arabs could not, do anything about it. Next, please. Why the reasons? It's for the 1967, first of all, to defeat the Arab national ideology, which was at that time the dominant ideology among the Arab, about national ideology, and to unite Arabs and to have one Arab, ban Arabism, and to have one Arab country, to defeat the Arab Unity Project, which came with Jamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt, who was trying to unify Arabs all in one country, and also to control the Suez Canal, which is very crucial and very important, and to control the water resources of Jordan River, which is coming from Golan Heights and from the Syrian borders to feed the Jordan River. They want to get the resources. Next, please. After that, so you can see the area which was occupied in that war, all of Sinai Desert, all of the West Bank and Gaza, and the Golan Heights in the north from Syria. So Syria lost, Jordan lost, and Egypt lost. And Israel have 3 times more land than its original size by this occupation. And we became, in the West Bank and Gaza, under the occupation, which is the remaining parts of historical Palestine. Next, please. And this is Moshe Dayan, the defense minister, entering Jerusalem and occupying Jerusalem for the first time. So we became people under occupation after 1967, and for the first 20 years, we've suffered a lot of this occupation till we have the first Intifada. Next, please. Even till today, when we are talking about, the Israeli occupation, they took over all our resources and controlled all the infrastructure in the West Bank and in Gaza, but especially the water. Now, the Israeli controlled our water basins. We are not allowed to dig a well. So we have to buy our own water from an Israeli company who was controlling all our water in the West Bank today. Well, till now, it's okay, but to know that they don't give us enough water. And that's why if you visit Palestine, the first thing you will notice, all these reservoirs on top of the buildings and these tanks on top of the buildings, ugly tanks, black ones or white ones. Because we have, even here in Ramallah, in my house, I have the water only 2 days a week. So in these 2 days, I have to fill all these tanks to use them during the week. And after that, there is no water. So, and in the summer, usually we have even more suffering. So the differences in the consumption between Jews living in Palestine or Israelis and between the Palestinians is exactly like the number on the left, 87 liters for the settler and 13 liters only for the Palestinian. Though we are talking about our own water, which they controlled. Next, please. And in 2002, 2003, they started building this separation wall, or as we call it, the apartheid wall, which they cut off it's supposed to be in the borders between 1967 and 1948. You know, Israel and the West Bank, occupied West Bank. But in reality, the wall was inside the West Bank, and the idea of it to create a barrier to isolate the Palestinians from the Israelis, and at the same time to cut off lots of land of the West Bank to annex it to Israel. Next, please. And you can see the red lines are the wall that they created, and you can see that most of these lines are inside the West Bank. It's not on the borders. Like in the middle, Qalqilia, a city, a Palestinian city, is totally surrounded by the wall and from all areas, and they have a gate. So can you imagine in your mind that a whole city is surrounded by a wall, and this wall has a gate? By the end of the day, an Israeli soldier could close this gate, and that's it. You look in the whole city, nobody can get in and nobody can get out. So this is the situation with the wall that we are now today are suffering. And more, the Israeli call it fence, you know, as if it's between two neighbors, this very wooden, nice, small. We are talking about 8 meters to 12 meters high concrete wall. Next, please. Yeah, this is Bethlehem. How about if Mary came to Bethlehem during the occupation? That will be the situation. Next, please. Arresting Palestinians, arresting even children, and under the occupation, whatever you read or know or saw films, it's not like to be a Palestinian under the occupation. It's a daily humiliation for the Palestinians. It's a daily killing. It's a daily blowing of houses. It's our suffering under the occupation is unbelievable, because this occupation is different from any other occupation. It's not about that they are occupy us, period. They occupy us in order to get us out, in order to ethnically cleanse Palestine and to continue in grabbing land, even till today. Next, please. Since 1967, we are talking about more than 850,000 Palestinians arrested, almost 1 million. That is more than 25% of the total population in Palestine were in prisons. 52% of those are under 18 years old. You know, in our population, Palestine, we are young population. 52% of the population are under 18. So if we are talking about, you know, adults, then it's 50% of all adults in Palestine were arrested by the Israeli occupation, including myself. Okay, next, please. Arresting, they are using torture, children arrest, and administrative detention. Administrative detention means that the Israeli, it's only in Israel that they could arrest anyone without pressing charges, without taking him to the court, because they suspect that he might do something, so they have the right to arrest him, and they arrest him illegally for 6 months period of time. It's renewable. They can change, renew it every 6 months to, you know, we have cases that people spend 12 years in prison in this, under this administrative arrest or detention, which is something against Geneva Convention and against the international law and human rights law, to arrest someone even without knowing why, without pressing charges. So they are there and they don't know why they are arrested. Additionally, as we say, the torture and the arresting of children. Now, the last thing is also the trials. We are subjected to military trials because we are under occupation. So the military who's doing these trials, and in the courts, it's military court, and it's absolutely not only unjust, but it's and also unfair. It's a charade. The secret services wanted the sentence, then the court will do it regardless of the evidence, or they don't even discuss evidence and these kind of things. It's just, you know, military courts, and they give sentences against Palestinians. Next, please. Now, the other big problem, what we are calling it settlements. These settlements, colonial settlements, that they, after 1967, started to create on the Palestinian land of 1967, or the West Bank and in Gaza. And now, at that time, it was the number of the settlements were small a little bit, but today it became a huge problem, especially with the last governments, right-wing governments in Israel. It became their policy is to create more and more settlements and to grab the land of the Palestinian and confiscate even private land, and to create these settlements and enlarge existing settlements in order to control the land, the Palestinian land. Next, please. So you can see that, well, the yellow dots are the settlements, but you can see from the settlements and where they are situated that they cut the West Bank into pieces. So when you look at the West Bank today, you can't talk about continuation of the land, because the Palestinian areas are the white color one on the map, and the green areas are sea areas under Oslo Agreement. We'll talk about it in a minute. Next, please. This is showing the number of settlements in the few decades and years. 1970 when they started, 1967 started, 1970 there were few number. Then in the 80s, they increased. In the 90s, increased more to 2000 till 2016. And when we look today at 2023, you will find that there are even more and more of these settlements, that turning the West Bank into a Swiss cheese with holes everywhere, that there is no continuation, and you can't create an entity or a state even in the West Bank because of these settlements and their roads, which only specially for settlers to use, and other roads for the Palestinians. And these settlers' road are cutting also the area into pieces, which that we can't even control. Next, please. So you can see from this map, 1947 map, the first one, these white dots were the Jewish property, which almost 6% of the historical Palestine. 1947 partition plan, but reality in 1949, what happened after the war, and they took over lots of our, supposed to be part of our land. And present time, where what we left with the West Bank is just, you know, a shady few areas populated by the Palestinians. Next, please. Now, after Oslo, we came out with the idea, or they came out with the idea of two-state solution. Two-state solution that the Palestinians will build their own state in the West Bank and Gaza. In return, they recognize Israel on 78% of historical Palestine. And that's what happened. The PLO recognized Israel officially, and Israel recognized PLO. They didn't recognize a Palestinian state so far. And the idea was that Israel will pull out from the West Bank eventually to give the Palestinian a state. But apparently, instead of two-state solution, it is two-state illusions. Because what happened in reality, that the Israeli never intended to give the Palestinian a state at all. And we'll see that. Next, please. Next. See that in Oslo Agreement, they cut the West Bank and Gaza into three areas: Area A, Area B, and Area C. And then the pink area, which is supposed to be, or they annex it officially to Israel, which is Jerusalem. And you can see from Area A, which is under the total control of the Palestinians, under the jurisdiction of the Palestinian Authority. Area B, which is the light green, is Area B supposed to be mutual, which is the Palestinian control the population, so administratively, and the Israeli control the security. In Area C, which is the vast majority of the West Bank, you can see the white area. This is still under the jurisdiction of the occupation, or under the occupation directly, where most of the settlements were created. Next, please. And you can see from the distribution of population about the Area C, the size of the area and the population. Zone A, Area A, 17% the population. 17% is the area. It's populated with 36% of the total population in Palestine. Area B, or Zone B, the area is 21% of the land, where 60% of the Palestinians are living. It's the rural areas. And C area, which is 61% of the total land of the West Bank, with only 4% of Palestinians living there. So when they made this zoning, supposed to Israeli give us more land from C to B and from B to A till the year 1999. That started in 1993, the Oslo Agreement. Till 1999, we should have a state. But what happened in reality, that they continue with the settlements, where they prevented us even from having our area to be a continuous area. And now what they are doing is taking over Area C, and they want to annex it to Israel. We will end up with something like 40% or 39% of the area size of Palestine or the West Bank, and the rest will be annexed to Israel. Next, please. So again, that what was left for us in the last map, few areas here and there scattered. The idea by the Israelis now that we should, agree to recognize this 40% or 39% as our state, and it's not connected. It's part of it in the north as a Bantustan, including Jenin, Nablus, Tulkarem, and Qalqilia. One in the center of the West Bank, which include Ramallah and Jericho, and one in the south will include Bethlehem and Hebron, the biggest city in the West Bank. So it's 3 Bantustans in addition to Gaza Bantustan. So 4 Bantustans separated from each other without any continuation, and you can call it a state. That is a recipe to get to kick the Palestinian out and to continue with the ethnically cleansing of Palestine. Next, please. But the difference is that we don't want to be like the original people of America, named the Red Indians, who were also subjected to ethnically cleanse from their own land, and now they are living in reservoir here and there. Next, please. Or we don't want to be like the Aborigines people of Australia, who are also pushed to smaller parts of Australia, and now the white colonialism taking over. Nor we wanted to be like, next please, the Maori people in New Zealand. In New Zealand, were subjected to ethnically cleanse and killing and being pushed out, and now New Zealand is a white colonialist country. Nor we want to be like, next please, Sami people who are in Scandinavia, who were pushed also to north of Scandinavia, to the very hard edge of Scandinavia, while the white settlers came and took over Sweden and Norway and Finland and these areas. Next, please. We, as Palestinians, subjected to ethnically cleanse, the difference between us and the four examples that we talked about in America, in New Zealand, in Australia, and in Scandinavia, that maybe we are, small country, and maybe we are people under occupation, but we are very loud. And we refuse to go silently, because of that, we resist. We resist this occupation, which is the last occupation now in the modern history, and it's an apartheid, racist, colonialist regime that is controlling the Palestinian people. And we are asking everyone to help, even by a word, about what's going on in Palestine, to understand the reality, in order to make an example like what happened in South Africa, to boycott this apartheid regime in order to put a kind of pressure and sanctions on this country like what happened in South Africa. We need the international community to stand by us. Officially, there is a double standard and hypocrisy among the countries, but the people do know what's going on with the Palestinians, and we hope that you will help us with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your amazing class, Professor Sa'd. It's an incredible pleasure and an incredible honor to have you here and to listen to all your words and your exposition. And it was absolutely clarifying, and it's always good to have access to this information, especially so well based and with such a great presentation like yours. So thank you very much. It's an honor to us to have you here. And so we are going now to the Q&A session. So we collected some questions that we received on the chat here on YouTube. So I want to start with the first one. So the first one was sent by Julia Lobo. So she says, thank you for your lecture. Is there a book you recommend to someone who wants to know more about the history of Palestine? So some people recommended the books of Edward Said and Elam Pape. This is one question. I would like to ask you if you want to answer the questions one by one, or should I ask in groups of 3?
Yeah, it's one by one, much better, so I won't forget what was the other questions.
Okay, so this is the first one. So
the suggestion, I agree with the suggestion. Elam Pape is good to talk about at least the last period, and he will get into some parts of the history. This is in order to understand that, and also there are other books to understand Zionism. Because we didn't focus much, talk about like 70 years, and we go in one class, one lecture, it won't be enough. If you want to go even further to understand Zionism, I would recommend Shlomo Sand books, the invention of the people of Israel and the invention of land of Israel. For Shlomo Sand, French Jews, Israeli, but he's now living in France. This would help, at least understanding the nature of Zionism, additionally to Elam Pape and Avi Shlaim as well, and another Israeli who writes about what's going on. Edward Said is also recommended on the Palestinian question, not the one on orientation.
Okay, great, thank you. The next one is Mariani Gennari. So she says, Professor Sa'd, since the invention of Israel was an European creation, I suppose that, or I assume that there was no reaction of European countries about the loss of Palestinian land to the Palestinian people, right? And she continues asking, were there any countries that contested it?
Well, when we come to the international community, this is really, really very tricky, because usually these countries, they issue their kind of policies by their own interests. That's the most important thing, their own interest. I was told by one ambassador of a European ambassador that we know what Israel is doing, and it's a very bad country. But, our interest with America is more important. So we are talking about interest. I'll give give you an example. The European countries, they are saying clearly that we deal with each and every country according to their human rights record, right? And that was the issue why they refused Turkey to join the European Union. But when it comes to Israel, they, you know, and its record is astronomical record of violating the human rights, but they did nothing about it. And they know, and still Israel have a very good position in the European Union and part of the Chamber of Commerce of Europe. So this is show to what extent the international community sometimes is hypocrite. We've been in front of, or we filed a case in front of the criminal law, the International Criminal Law, or ICC, 5 years ago, about the Gaza war, about the prisoners, and about the settlements. These three issues in front of the court. For 6 years, so far they didn't start the interrogation or the investigation, if you like, okay? While after 2 months of the war between Ukraine and Russia, immediately the ICC court ruled. So it's bias, it's double standard.
Right. Let me go for the next one. So this one was sent by Sabrina. Professor, is there any similarity between the creation of the Jewish state and Liberia, West Africa coast? Or the creation of the Zionist state is more similar to South Africa due to the apartheid system?
Yes, it's more like what happened in the apartheid system. At the beginning, it was not the same exactly way, but in South Africa, the whites were the privileged one, despite of the number of the population. In the case of Israel, when they create Israel and they kicked out the Palestinian, right, now there is a discrimination. I'm not going to talk about the West Bank and our occupation after 1968. I'm talking about the Palestinians who remained inside Israel in 1948. They are now 21% of the population of Israel. 21 of the population in Israel itself are Palestinian Arabs, and they are officially, according to the law, citizens of Israel. How do they been treated by the Israeli regime, especially after in the last 4 years they came out with the national law? Now they are not considered even as citizens, and there is a discrimination against them when the law says that this land is only for the Jews. Israel is now declaring itself officially as a Jewish state, and anyone, even citizens who are living in it, not Jew, then he will be discriminated against. So this is an apartheid regime. This is a racist regime. Okay, the similarities between South Africa and Israel are huge, especially in conducting their actions and especially in suppressing the people in South Africa and suppressing the people in Palestine, killing everywhere, and the same orders, the same examples. They kill someone and they said, we thought that he's going to stab us with a knife. And that repeated in Palestine, that was repeated in South Africa. It's suppressing the people by a racist apartheid regime.
It's very interesting. I would allow myself just real quick to make a comment on this. Also, if I'm not wrong, the apartheid system in South Africa also took place starting in 1948. And so the first relations, like the states who recognized themselves was like the state of Israel and the state of apartheid in South Africa, also creating relations between the resistance of South Africans and Palestinians, too, which says a lot about this.
Yes, exactly. Rafur. And I'll add something else, that when the whole world boycotted South Africa because it's an apartheid regime, the only country who didn't boycott was Israel, and they continue with their relation with this apartheid regime.
Yeah. Okay. There's another one, and this is quite interesting too, and related to what you were saying right now. I have a question. So this one was sent by Isabella Alves Pereira. I have a question. It is, very common to hear Israelis calling Palestinian Arabs and not Palestinians. Could you comment on these and whether it is part of a project to deny the existence of a Palestinian state?
Yeah. Well, look, let me be very frank with you. We were part of a larger area, the Mesopotamia, okay, which is today, if you like, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine. That was one country, that was one area. So till that time, if you are from one country, you don't name yourself of a region. Palestine is a region of that country. So we didn't say that we are Palestinians. We say we are Arabs, we are Shami, or, belongs to Bilad Sham, belongs to this Mesopotamia. After 1918, when we have the Zionist movement and the colonial British power in Palestine and the Palestinian national movement started, we start to recognize that differently from other Arabs, we have two problems, not one. It's the colonial power, which was all over the Arab world, and we have to fight it. But additionally, we have the Zionist movement as well, who are going to kick us out and to take over our land. So that will give us the identity, more strong identity as Palestinians. Now, when we say Palestinians, we mean, all those who are living in the West Bank and being Palestinians, whether they are Muslims, Christians, and even Jews, because we still have a community of Jews in Nablus, for instance, which is the Samaritans, and they are considered themselves as Palestinian Arabs, and they speak Arabic, and they are living among us, and that's normal. Now, the problem is that the Israeli try to differentiate between religions and between, sects, and in order to divide and conquer. As easy as that. So if they try to isolate Christians and isolate, Druze, or isolate, I don't know who, in order to make differentiation among the Palestinian people, in order to divide and conquer, if you like, to keep us in small groups rather than as a whole people. So yeah, they name us lots of things like Arabs because they want to push us to Arab countries. Yesterday, the settlers in Hawara were saying, go to Jordan, go to Syria. You shouldn't be here, as if, like we are Arabs, so we have to go. No, this is our country, this is our land, this is for thousands of years we've been living here. We are not going to leave that country.
It's very interesting, and one of the things that catches my attention the most is like these local expressions of identity. For example, Palestinians of 48 re-emphasizing the Palestinian identity instead of the Israeli imposed identity. So it's not about Arabs in Israel, but like Palestinians in Palestine, in this, which is very interesting. So there's another question. Here's from Stephanie Carolina, and she asks, what is the advantage for those who finance the conflict, for those who are not interested in finishing this? What's the United Nations position?
Right. Well, to start with, who's benefiting out of having Israel? Definitely, it's the West in general. At the beginning, it was the British, and later on now it's America, because America is the only country now defending Israel and financing Israel and supporting Israel and even defending Israel in the United Nations when we have resolutions against Israel. Why they are doing that? Because they want a kind of a presence of a colonial white power in the middle of the heart of the Middle East. They don't want the Middle East or the Arab countries to be united, and hence they are there to prevent that and to make a kind of a common enemy to keep the area under their control, especially for the West. Let's look at the facts again. In 1948, Israel was created after this war. Give me any decade since then till today, Israel was not a major war in the region. After 1948, we have 56 on Egypt. Then we have a war in 1967. Then we have the war of 1973. Then we have the war of 1982. Then we have the war of 2006. In the 90s, 1991 in Iraq. Then we have the one in 2006 in Lebanon. And then we have 1914, 29 on Gaza, 2014 on Gaza, and 2018 on Gaza. So yeah, you can't find 10 years without Israel being involved in a major role. From the perspective of the American, keep problems all over, and everyone is buying weapons from us. The Saudis bought weapon a few years ago for $465 billion from Trump administration. So it's up to them to say, yeah, keep the things going, and they will support Israel. As far as the United Nations, you might find lots of resolutions against Israel, and we have something like 700 resolutions in the General Assembly, but who had the power to execute any of these resolutions? You need the will, and the will in the hands of America. America is supporting Israel, so it's not going to allow, any of these resolutions to pass.
Thank you. There's another question. This is from Maria Isabel Cunha. The question is, let me read it. How big of a part would you say that Islamophobia plays in this massacre, or the relation, anyway, between the situation in Palestine and Islamophobia? And she thanks you for the class.
Right, yeah, and thank you for the question, because, usually after 9/11, what happened that there was this Islamophobia, and there was, this American definition of terrorism, and they tried to link, the Israelis, the Palestinian struggle with terrorism, and any act of resistance to the occupation, the Israeli will try to say it's, terrorism, and they link that with Islam, especially that we have at least two organizations in Palestine are Islamic organizations such as Hamas and Islamic Jihad. But these are part of our people, even if their ideology is Islam, but by the end of the day, it's part of our people. And what they are doing is they are trying to defend our people, and they are trying to get our rights. If you ever hear of Islamic Jihad or Hamas had done anything outside Palestine, then we can say it's a terrorist organization. But since we are defending ourselves from the occupation, then even Hamas, though it's Islamic, and Islamic Jihad are not a terrorist in this respect, and they shouldn't be within the idea of Islamic groups that they are talking about, like Daesh or Al-Qaeda or whatever, Nusra, other groups like that. To the contrary, these are part of our people who are defending our people and trying to get our rights back. Now, the Israelis are using the Islamophobia in the West, trying to present the Palestinian struggle and the Palestinian resistance as part of the Islamic kind of, terrorism, and in order to get, a kind of a support by these countries.
It's interesting. We have a very interesting, the questions are interesting, of course, but one that it's very interesting from Natalia Carvalhosa. So she asks, if possible, could you talk a little bit about what it has been like to act as a professor and researcher at Birzeit University in the face of the Zionist offensives, considering the university as a political field of dispute over narratives?
Right, yes. We are, as educators, also suffer a lot because the whole education system is suffering from the occupation. And next week we will have also the week of Solidarity with Palestine Education Week. However, the education in Palestine, like all other aspects of life, being subjected to the Israeli atrocities and Israeli pressure. Now, for education, for me, if you like, I come in the morning to my classes, and I'll find like half the class is not there because there is a roadblock in between Ramallah and Jerusalem. It's closed, so the students didn't come and attend. What should I do? Continue with only 20 students? Or wait for the rest, or postpone the class. So this is a pressure. International students who come to our classes also now are, some of them returned from the airport, and some of them are not even allowed to come, and that will affect us as educators. We as educators in Birzeit University. We are also part of the BDS, so we are boycotting the Israeli academia, because by the end of the day, the Israeli universities, though it's supposed to be liberal and free, we didn't hear any university says that occupation is illegal or occupation is unethical. Okay, so they are, to the contrary, supporting the occupation to our country. And you have to know that part of Hebrew University, the most important university in Jerusalem, are on the land of Palestinians, which was confiscated and, to enlarge the university. So it's for us as educators, we suffer a lot from everything. They are trying to interfere in the education system. They are trying to impose on us lots of laws. They forbid 37 professors who are from outside Palestine, who came as foreigner, they used to teach in our universities, to kick them out all. It was 2 years ago. And our share was 17 of these professors were at Birzeit University. Our colleagues, they were with us and they were kicked out from the country because they don't want them to teach in Palestine.
We received lots of questions. I am not making all of them because many of your answers are already answering other questions. So, Professor, this is a question sent by Vinicius Pedreira, and he asks, Professor, since the two-state solution is in fact a two-state illusion, he says, currently, is there any perspective of a one-state solution?
That's what we are thinking of, because the two-state solution became behind us now, because the Israelis make it impossible to have one state for each country or, for each people. So it's the two-state solution is behind us. That's why I call it illusion. In reality, yes, we are talking about one state. We are talking about, because by the end of the day, no one wanted to kick anyone out or could do that. This country can't be partitioned into two. It can't be partitioned. So by the end of the day, we should have, one state for equal rights for everyone, a democratic, secular state, regardless of your religion. The most important thing to be citizen in this country and have, all the rights. What they are offering us today, the Israelis, is to have one state, but with two laws. One law for Jews and one law for the Palestinians, where the Palestinians will be prevented from the civil rights. Okay, but this is not going to work. On the long run, what we are looking for is one state where we have all equal laws for everyone, and this is, I think, the only solution that we still have, in front of us to solve the problem properly.
Okay, and already coming to the end. Sorry. Also related to the actual context of the political situation in Palestine, let's say. So Paula Pereira she asks, what's the biggest threat that the recent Netanyahu government would represent about the situation with the Palestinians in this sense?
Right. Well, for Netanyahu's government, he don't care at all about what's going on in Palestine, and he left that for his allies in the government, Ben Gvir and Smotrich, which is, we are talking about, far right wings in the Israeli politics and in the religious Zionists who believe that all the land of Palestine are the land of Israel, and it should be taken by the Israelis. Smotrich ideas and plans consist of 3 stages that we should, or offers, or solutions, if you like. The first one, that the Palestinian will accept the total control of Israel and live in these, pockets as he called them, separated pockets in the West Bank and Gaza, without interfering in politics and accepting whatever the Israeli offer us. As you know, we are not citizens. We are allowed to live there, but we have no rights. Okay, so that's the first option. The second option, to leave the country. And he said, we will facilitate that. We will help you with money, and we will help you to obtain visas to immigrate from the country. This is a second option for the Palestinians. And the third option is, if you refuse the first two options, then violence and more violence. And that's what we are seeing today. The campaign that they are creating now, this government, Netanyahu's government, is to grab more land and bring all these settlers to take over the land and to create outposts, which they are going to be new settlements in the near future, and bringing settlers into the West Bank. Today, we are talking about around 800,000 settlers in the West Bank. The plan by 2025, 3 years from now or 2 years from now, to have 1 million settlers. That's on whose expense? On which land? It's the land of the Palestinians. Now, the problem is that when we are talking about the rural areas, when we talk about a village, what is the definition of a village? Where you have land and farmers, right? Now, we have villages, but without land. All the land confiscated or behind the wall. So what's the use of this village? It's a hotel. It's not a village. These people who are living only to go to sleep there, and during the day they go to work in Israel, to go to work in the Israeli factories and in Israeli land, or became their land. And they came at night only to live. So we lost the essence of this cultural and even moral issue of having a village which is supposed to be based on farming, and it became just a hotel for the Palestinian workers. So this is the ideas of Netanyahu's government. To add to it a little bit, why he did not care at all about the act of his partners, Smotrich and Ben Gvir, the far right wings, because he wanted to keep himself as a prime minister. The moment that he finished his term as a prime minister, he's facing 3 court orders of corruption. Now he wanted them with them in his coalition to change the laws in Israel, and that's what's creating the big problem among the Israeli themselves population, who's going out in demonstrations saying that Israel is turning into a fascist country, and that Netanyahu is turning because he wants to control the law, the executive power, and to make laws as he likes. And they accuse him of, leaving democracy in such case. He don't care because he wants to support him in that, and in return, do whatever you like. The West.
Right. All right. I think actually this was already the last question. Let me just check if we have some any others. Yeah, we had we had almost 40 questions. So of course, but also we are. This shows that your lecture was absolutely interesting, and we thank everyone for the questions sent. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to make all of them. We are already reaching 2 hours, and wow, it's so inspiring to hear you. So thank you very much. Again, I apologize for not making all the questions, but I hope that the questions we've made could clarify things also for the others. So thank you very much for your presence. It's very inspiring and, again, clarifying. I like this word. And it's so important to have a professor like you speaking and showing us, especially from the ground, the situation of Palestine or in Palestine, and yeah, considering historical facts and the ongoing Nakba and the current context. So thank you very much again. I would like to invite back Professor Arlene, and thank you. So it was a pleasure to be here and to hear from you.
Thank you, Rafael. Thank you a lot, and all the audience, and the kind of questions means that they are interested, and I was really very happy with the questions as well. So thank you, and Arlene, thank you very much for arranging everything and for this course, and I hope it will be a big success and bringing up us, closer together in Brazil and in Palestine, and I hope for our next cooperation as well. Thank you.
Well, yes, I also would like to thank you, Professor Sa'd, for your class. And I also agree that we had amazing questions, very good questions. And thank you for your effort of speaking for all this time. I know how tiring it is. Another thing that I would like to say is that it is, I really want to thank you for, going on and speaking about this, bringing us the narrative of Palestine. It is always different to listen to you tell us this story from your point of view, with your words, with your emphasis, and how you lived it and your people lived it. There's always a huge difference. So it's very good to listen to that. Also, I'm, as everyone, so sorry that we speak and speak and speak, and you're here speaking and speaking and speaking while things do not change.
Yeah.
While the situation does not change.
That's right.
Yeah. So we go on. We go on, and I thank you all for the questions, and remind you that we have all the resources for the class, the explanations, the other classes, the materials, and we'll meet again in 1 week. And Professor Sa'd will also have the link if he wants to listen to his colleagues continuing. And see you all then next Thursday. And thank you very much, the editor Tabla, for this amazing support.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Hope to see